Hello, welcome to Mike's Mass Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota. Happy Wednesday to you, and happy deadline, where we just got past the trade deadline for the New York Mets. It was a busy one. We have a lot to recap. There weren't a lot of major expectations. Anything that was going to happen that we were kind of anticipating any major acquisitions here. There wasn't going to be this like superstar. Oh, the Mets traded for Skubal from the Tigers or anything like that. There was going to be just gradual minor additions to kind of improve the depth, improve what needed to be improved upon, and clearly filling in some of the holes that this team had still en route to the second half of the season and the final stretch. So these last 2 months are going to be tough. The Mets had to make major moves, and they came away with some pretty big ones. And just in my estimation, these are moves that, while they may not seem big, are going to help the team. And I firmly believe that the moves that David Stearns made to kind of fill in these gaps over the final few weeks of the season are going to pay dividends and are going to be truly impactful for this team's postseason chances and what they're hoping to do. So just wanted to shout out my new theme song. If you heard that in our intro, if you didn't skip past it, please don't. This was generated through AI, Donna. So I want to shout them out and thank them so much for that creation. I really love it. I've always been searching for a nice theme to start the podcast off. I've been using stock music this entire time, but this was something that I can call my own for the future, and I really enjoy it. It's a little yellow card, a little Matchbox 20, but I definitely love my theme song. So if you're inclined to try out an AI music generator, try out Donna. It's Donna, available on App Store and Google Play Store. This is not an ad. I'm just really appreciative of what they're doing for me. So I really enjoyed that theme song. But back to the deadline. We had 4 additions that the Mets made, and you can see that in the picture if you're watching this on YouTube. So we had the 4 major additions that were Jesse Winker, Paul Blackburn. I'm gonna do my best with the pronunciation. Not so good with pronunciations. It's Huascar Brazaban. I believe I'm saying that correctly. And then lastly, we have Tyler Zubar. Is that how you say it? Zuber, I believe that's how you say it. But those are the 4 trades that the Mets made, and we're going to break them all down, as well as all the moves the Mets made. And there were quite a few transactions that needed to be made. Starting with, and I didn't shout him out because he wasn't technically a trade deadline addition, but the Mets had acquired him last week. And that was trading for Ryan Stanek, who the Mets picked up from the Seattle Mariners last week in a trade that sent a minor league outfielder, Rylan Thomas. Pretty insignificant move, but it was one that kind of helped shore up the Mets bullpen. Stanek made his debut with the Mets last week against the Braves. It did not go well. Stanek, pretty good history with the Astros, most notably, and he did his. He's come through with some big moves in some cases, but this was something. He's in the middle of like the worst year of his career. Then that's pretty clear if you just look at his stats. He's just not really performing to the way that most people would expect him to perform. And his performance in his debut with the Mets was something of a disaster. He gave up 2 home runs and his 1 inning of work. We have not seen him make an appearance since. That's not to say that he's never going to appear again, but Stanek did not look good in that first appearance, and maybe some jitters. It was definitely facing a Braves team that was swinging for the fences in that game, but tough to see him just go down that badly in that debut. It was just a very poor performance, but we're hoping to see him bounce back and factor in a much bigger way, because he is a good reliever, great history, a guy who would performed really well, most notably, and I think it was in 2022 with the Astros. He had a 1.15 ERA, 62 strikeouts, 54 innings pitched. This season hasn't been performing quite as well. You've seen the ERA jump up. His home runs are about the same, walks are about the same. So it's a little unclear as to what he's doing wrong, really. I think we've seen the home run rate climb a little bit higher than we saw at his peak in 2022, but as to be expected, some pitchers are just going to decline as time goes by, but we're kind of just going by with that. So Stanek, not a trade line acquisition technically, so I didn't shout him out at the beginning of the podcast, but did want to mention Stanek. He was the first pin to drop really in this crazy trade deadline period for the Mets. They would send, like I said, Rylan Thomas. Again, Thomas not really somebody who jumps out in the prospects rankings. So no major loss there. The Mets would activate and then deactivate Kodai Senga in pretty dramatic fashion. So Kodai made his debut against the Braves, season debut against the Braves, was brilliant. I mean, really, really incredible in that debut. And then for a goddamn calf strain to take Kodai out, it's just bad. And the Mets have said it's probably for a season-ending injury. They're not entirely sure when he would be able to return, but considering he missed the first part of the season with the injury to the arm, if I forget the specifics of that injury, but he had been rehabbing that for the last few months. Comes back, looks great, and then goes down with a calf strain that just happens to be apparently the worst possible calf strain you can get. That wasn't involving like a tear. Tough to see. I mean, really hard to watch, and just it was the Mets were kind of counting on that starting rotation help that Kodai was going to give, and now we have a little bit of a gap in the starting rotation that the Mets are just going to have to kind of work around, and unfortunately they had to do that. So they would option down DJ Stewart to the Syracuse Mets in preparation for the trade that the Mets would make. This is nothing against DJ Stewart, but he performed very poorly in the season, and there was a lot of expectations that Stewart was going to be taking on major DH duties. He was going to be the Mets' principal left-handed power bat coming off the bench. He has done really nothing to justify him being in the lineup anymore, and in the rare situations that we saw Mendoza put him in, he did not perform well. Any confidence that Mendoza showed in him was not returned, so we're kind of left with the Mets having to change gears. They go out in a trade for Jesse Winker, most recently on the Washington Nationals, and Winker, veteran, checkered history with Met fans. If anyone's not aware of the history, there was the taunting situations with Met fans. Winker said that it was all in like good fun, and it was just a little bit of him giving it back to Mets fans who were jeering him. But he definitely has some attitude. Nonetheless, he seemed to have ingratiated himself very nicely with the current Mets lineup. We saw him and Alonso have a little home run celebration thing with the touching of the cleats after Alonso hit his home run the other day. Winker's addition, probably something that people wouldn't have seen coming, considering the vitriol that surrounded him from Met fans. But Winker comes over. He is, let's say, a somewhat overrated player. I had shouted out Jesse Winker a few weeks ago on this podcast, wherein I said I was very eager for the Mets to make a trade for him. He is something of a name, I guess you would say. People recognize the name Jesse Winker because he's been in the league for the last few years, and he's had bouts of success, most notably with the Cincinnati Reds, where he made an All-Star team actually. Since that All-Star team performance, that season he was 2021, I believe, and then since then he has struggled for the most part. He has not looked like the same All-Star. He had a decent year with the Seattle Mariners, but looked absolutely terrible last season, and that was something of a surprise, I think, to a lot of people, that Winker was just so bad. I mean, he was playing with the Brewers last year, and I assume that is where Stearns is probably familiar with Winker mostly and why he was interested in acquiring him, because even though Winker performed terribly, there was something of like, oh well, I have a history with this guy of like, I had acquired him, and he bounced back in in really good fashion with the Nationals. He has 11 home runs, 45 RBIs on the season, 14 stolen bases, a career high for him. That's a new feature. He has never stolen more than one base in a season before. Now he stole 14. So he's been flashing a little bit of the base running, which is good to see. Considering it wasn't something that people really thought of him. When Winker's best, he's hitting the ball well. He's driving the ball. He's hitting the gap. But what he's good for is primarily is getting on base and hitting home runs. He has power, and the guy can just flat out get on base. He has a career 370 on base percentage, and it's probably the biggest factor in his career OPS being at 810, because his slugging numbers have dipped sort of slightly since his prime years with Cincinnati. The Mets are getting him pretty cheap. He is only making $2 million a year, and he's going to provide that lefty power bat option. I believe that DJ Stewart just couldn't do. DJ Stewart just really was not able to factor in any way. And it's possible that Winker will sort of fall away as the season goes by. Maybe this is sort of a outlier season. I'm more inclined to believe that it's something more to something in between his prime Cincinnati days and his absolutely terrible year with Milwaukee, that you're getting a player that's not a super important player. He's a role player. And they're not expecting him to be anything more than really a fourth outfielder, a guy you can platoon in right field. And that's what they're expecting him to play, because they're not going to move Brandon Nimmo from left field, where Nimmo's had a lot of success. They're not moving Harrison Bader. And so they're going to ride with this Winker in right field, playing a little bit of DH, coming off the bench, and using him in that manner. And I think it's a good move for them. We'll see how long Winker is going to be in this kind of capacity with the eventual return of Starling Marte. That will also add another wrinkle into the Mets' deployment of players as time goes by. But for now, the Mets acquire a good left-handed power hitter, a guy who can do a number of things, including getting on base. Can steal bases. It's a good move. I like it. It's cheap. It was for relatively low cost. The Mets just traded away a minor league pitcher who most people are not expecting him to factor it in any kind of way. He has probably a career as a reliever, if anything. So good move for the Mets to acquire Winker there. Their next move was yesterday, the Winker trade was on the 28th. The Mets were quiet on the 29th, other than finally DFAing Jake Diekman, a long overdue move, because Diekman was absolutely terrible. And I had been really excited for the Diekman era in Flushing. He did not show any of the same success that he did previously in his career. He looked really, really bad. I don't know if it was just like a fit issue or what the situation was. He had the one highlight, which was the performance against the New York Yankees in that Subway Series, where he strikes out Judge in that critical save opportunity in the Yankee Stadium. That was the highlight of his season. He immediately went back into crappy Diekman mode, and thankfully they finally DFA'd him. I was glad to see that. But yesterday the Mets made a flurry of trades to acquire Paul Blackburn first from the Oakland Athletics. Blackburn, veteran starting pitcher, a guy who, if Met fans aren't totally familiar with Blackburn's resume and the type of pitcher he is, he's basically a low 90s off-speed pitcher. This is a guy who primarily functions with his pitches. He's pretty set up in using the fastball as a setup pitch, and then using one of his off-speed pitches, either it's the cutter, the slider, changeup, any one of those. He'll use those to kind of get the punch out or get the ground ball out. He's not a guy who's going to jump off the page, and if you're going to look at him, you'll say he just looks like another starting pitcher, and that's pretty much what he is. He's right on that average line. He started off the season, and it should be noted that Blackburn got hurt in early May. He had a stress reaction, I believe was the term, in his foot that caused him to miss about 2 months. He only recently came back. Didn't look amazing, but looked generally with the generally just what Blackburn is. And in his return with the A's, and then but he started off the season on a absolute hot streak, 22 consecutive scoreless innings to start the season off, and looked outstanding. And then things just started to come back to him at that point. So eventually the league got wise to him, and then he kind of dipped back into his average starts. He's not going to blow anybody away. If I was looking at him and saying I would like him over, let's say, Tyler McGill, absolutely. McGill may throw harder. Given McGill's checkered history, I would much rather roll the dice on a veteran who has a little bit more of a proven track record than Tyler McGill. So Blackburn will come over. He'll do his thing. It's not going to be pretty most of the time, but he'll be a professional and he'll get the job done. So we're looking forward to that. The Mets' next move was to acquire Huascar Brazoban. This was pretty much right in the deadline move, and I got the alert while I was driving back from work yesterday that the Mets had traded for him, and I was surprised because, one, I'm not really that familiar with Brazoban. If you're watching the Marlins, which I'm not, then Brazoban, the last 3 seasons, has been the sort of pleasant addition to the Marlins bullpen. He's been pretty impressive for them. He's done his job. He's a solid middle reliever for them. One of the weirder histories I've ever read. So Brazoban is 34 years old. He's only been in the league. This is his 3rd season. So he debuted as a 32-year-old with the Marlins. One of the crazier histories I've seen in a while, which was he started off. He was signed as a international free agent by the Rockies about a decade ago, and stayed in their minor league system for about 5-6 years. Eventually, he became a free agent. No one picked him up. He signed in the Atlantic League with the Barnstormers, I believe their name is. And then once he was with the Barnstormers, he pitched there for 1 season. So going into the 2019 season, he's unable to sort out a visa issue, and he has to miss the 2019 season. Comes back for 2020, but of course 2020, they canceled the entire Atlantic League season, so he does not pitch that year. So he loses 2 seasons, a full 2 years that he's not pitching any professional baseball. And he comes back in 2021 with another team, I believe. Which team that was? I'm looking that up right now. But so he comes back in 2021, still in the Atlantic League, pitches well, ends up coming into the Marlins camp as an invitee in spring training, signs a minor league contract with the Marlins, pitches really well, and then they're like, okay, yeah, we'll call you up, and he makes his debut in 2022 as a 32-year-old rookie. Pitches really well, and he's been pitching really well for the last 3 years. There is apparently some kind of fiasco with Brazoban and the visa situation, because once again in 2024 he runs into another problem with the visa. He starts off the year not on the Marlins roster at first because he has to sort out this visa issue. So he starts later in the year. So he hasn't made that many appearances this season. So he's been limited in terms of how much people have actually seen him for the most part. But when he has been available, which is, I believe he's made 19 appearances this year, and has looked really good. I mean, this has been, I think, the best year of Brazoban's young career. When I say young career, I mean relatively small, in terms of length, not in age. He is 34 years old, but he's looked really sharp. 34 strikeouts against 11 walks. So he got a 3.09 strikeout to walk ratio. really good for a reliever, particularly for the Mets. They need some guys who can not walk the ballpark. Would be really helpful. 2.63 FIP. A big part of that is he's only allowed one home run in 30 innings pitched. Again, another thing the Mets relievers would love to have is not giving up too many home runs. The Mets bullpen struggles a lot in terms of that, and really their entire starting rotation kind of struggles with that also. So bringing in Brazoban, really a good move. This was, I think, a really savvy addition. Brazoban acquired for just a minor league infielder, Wilfredo Lua. I believe I'm saying that correctly. Lara. Okay, sorry. So Wilfredo Lara he was a shortstop in the minor leagues for the Mets, but the Mets have like a glut of minor league middle infielders, so not really that big a loss. So bringing in Brazoban, a good move, really, with along with Stanek, who we're hoping that he can be helpful, and eventually the return of Daniel Nunez, who had to go on the IL with a pectoral strain, I believe it was some kind of strain. But he went down around the same time that Kodai did, so they lost him as well. It was a pronator strain that he had, and that was one issue that he had to kind of battle. That's another issue the Mets have had to battle through, is that the loss of a key reliever, Nunez, and they've had to put a lot of strain on, unfortunately, Jose Budo in the aftermath of that. So that was a critical move, bringing in Brazoban. And then the final move that was kind of under the radar, actually I didn't realize it until later last night, that the Mets had made another trade. They traded from the Tampa Bay Rays. They brought in right-handed reliever Tyler Zuber. And Zuber, not somebody who's been seen a lot of action in the major leagues. He has only made 3 appearances this year with the Rays, primarily in the bullpen, and he's been pitching primarily in the AAA this year, but looked good in AAA, looked good with the Rays in the brief appearances that he made, and the Mets made the trade. They brought him over, and Zuber, just another guy who's going to probably be filling in some of these middle relief innings for the Mets during the time that he's up with the team. Presumably, when Nunez comes back, that might lead to them sending down Zuber. We have to check and we have to see what the Mets' official plans are with him. But for now, they're going to continue rolling with that group. So Mets come in with some much-needed bullpen reinforcements, headed by Brazoban. They acquire a left-handed hitter in Jesse Winker, guy who could help the team's lineup, fill in that hole, be a good hitter off the bench, and then help the starting rotation by bringing in Paul Blackburn to kind of shore up that starting rotation depth. It's been an interesting stretch for the Mets, where they have a lot of really good performances very recently in series against the Yankees, Marlins, Braves, and they just beat the ever-loving hell out of the Twins in the first game of the series, 15-2, where the Mets offense just unloaded repeatedly on that Twins pitching staff, and then was complete opposite in Game 2, where the Mets' starting rotation was terrific, and not the starting rotation. Their entire pitching staff was outstanding last night, and was led by Sean Manaea, who looked. This was Manaea's best start of the season. He strikes out 11 in what was just an outstanding performance. It was really, really exciting to see Manaea pitch that well. It's such a critical start for the Mets to kind of pick up 2 out of 3 from a Minnesota Twins team that most people expect to be in the postseason this year. But he was amazing, and they limited the Twins to just 2 hits over the night. The entire pitching staff looked terrific, and were led by offense. There's only 2 runs in this game, but we saw an RBI from JD Martinez, and then Mark Vientos coming through with another home run. Vientos, probably the difference maker, I would have to say at this point, for this Mets team that's just had this incredible power stretch where they've are just throwing so much weight at opposing pitchers. They have so many good power hitters. They can just throw Alonso and Martinez and Alvarez and Vientos. And Vientos, I think, has just been this difference maker where you would have the unimpressive performances repeatedly from Brett Beatty, where he would just be this black hole in the lineup. He wouldn't be doing anything for the team. Couldn't hit for power. Couldn't hit for anything, really. Vientos has been this complete opposite. Vientos just absolutely demolishes the baseball, and there's been a lot of comparisons. People are looking at him and saying, this guy might be Alonso 2.0 now. It's been an amazing first half with Vientos. He's kept up his momentum. He's looked great. We also have to shout out Jeff McNeil. McNeil, I've been calling for his head for most of the season. He has looked unnervingly great in this second half so far, where he's been batting like around 400. He has like an 800 like slugging percentage, like 4 home runs, 5 doubles. It's really impressive how good he's looked. So McNeil's been an impressive part of that lineup, and he's been sort of the guy who's been just another like, oh yeah, and we have McNeil who's red hot right now. And then you throw in Francisco Lindor, continues to do his thing, and Brandon Nimmo continues to do his thing, and all these guys, it becomes this really like overwhelming lineup 1 through 9 that can look potentially just like destructive at times against opposing pitchers. And you have all those guys, you throw in a starting rotation that's been pretty strong, let's say, holding it together, with solid performances from Severino and Minaya and Quintana. And then you throw in Blackburn there, and you have a group of veterans who, if you look at them and say, all right, like, let's say they go into a postseason series and they have to, they're playing in the wild card round. The Mets can throw Severino, Minaya, and Quintana. It's a good group. It's 3 starters that could very well win if they're pitching well that day. And with the Mets offense performing as well as it has been, let's hope that if the Mets are in the postseason, that this offense is still chugging along the way they have been now. It's a good indicator that this team has some major postseason legs. We have to see how some of these guys perform. I'm really interested to see how Blackburn performs, because the Mets do have another year of him under control, so they have a chance for using him for not just this year, but also next year, and trying to see how well he pitches and how well he factors into this team's future. But he will be an interesting part of it. Brazoban, because of the fact that this is only his 3rd year of action. He's not even arbitration eligible until 2026. So he's the Mets are getting him for like a fraction of the cost of what a normal good reliever is. They're paying him, I think, $750K this season. So this is, I thought, a terrific and savvy acquisition for the Mets, bringing him over. And they just look really good. It looks like a good group. It wasn't this, like, oh, we're going to shower this team with stars, which seems to never really work out that well for the Mets whenever they're going big game hunting for major acquisitions. Doesn't seem to always work out for the Mets. What does work out for the Mets is the under-the-radar moves. And Stearns is kind of notable for this. He doesn't make a lot of major trades. He doesn't make a lot of major acquisitions when he was with the Brewers. And his biggest trade was acquiring Christian Yelich. And he waited for the perfect time to jump on Yelich when he was with the Brewers, making that trade. And it was a home run acquisition. Yelich won the MVP, and that was what the Mets were. What the Brewers. He was the main focus of that Brewers lineup for the next few years. That's what Stearns does. Stearns is just pick your spots, wait for the opportune moment to arrive. He's very patient. He doesn't get aggressive but when he is aggressive, he really knows what he wants to go after. And in this case, he wanted to go after bullpen reinforcements, a starting pitcher who could help patch together that rotation over the final 2 months of that season, and bringing in a left-handed power hitter to replace DJ Stewart and give them a left-handed bat off the bench. He accomplished all of those things. This team looks ready to make a postseason run in its current configuration. It looks, for all accounts, to be a legitimate contender, and they are 6 games over 500. They very briefly took over second place. I actually firmly believe given the fact that the Braves have declined and struggled so much, at the same time the Mets are surging forward, that there's a good chance the Mets could take over second place permanently. And then you look at it and you say, the Phillies aren't that far ahead anymore. The Phillies have also been struggling. They've had a lot of injuries, much like the Braves have. Really, everybody's been dealing with injuries, and so the Mets have positioned themselves very nicely in terms of the way that they can kind of take another step forward and maybe put themselves in an even better position in the wild card and get them a better chance at a quality opponent, maybe a one that they can even take down and move forward in the playoffs. I'm not going to put not getting ahead of myself in this case, but I look at this team and I really like it. They've really changed things up and adapted, and that's a sign of a good team. The way that you perform when you're not doing well and the way that you make changes is really important. And David Stearns has really let this team a level of authenticity and believability that they are a legitimate contender, and this team has performed above and beyond expectations. It's really fun and exciting to watch this team now with an offense that's performing well, with a pitching staff that has been, for now, doing pretty solid, and a bullpen that, even with all the injuries, has been putting it together, and they've been using what they've had. They've gotten a great out of nowhere bullpen performance from Jose Butto. Butto may be another starting rotation piece. We're not really quite sure where he fits in at this point, but they've been using him as this specialized long reliever, and it's been working out great because he'll pitch 3 innings of quality relief, which the Mets really desperately need with all the struggling and injured relievers that the Mets have brought on. They're hoping now with all the bullpen reinforcements that this team now has a chance that they don't have to rely quite so much on Butto. Maybe Butto can go back into the starting rotation. But Butto's been terrific for that team. Everyone's been pitching well for the most part. Everyone's been hitting well for the most part. It's really a fun time in Citi Fields whenever you're going to games and whenever you're watching this stuff. For the most, it's been exciting to watch. It's been fun to watch. This is fun baseball which I've been watching for the first time in a couple of years. It's great to see, and I think the makeup of the Mets is always, it's not the dominant team. It's the team that performs best when you don't really expect it. It's the team that's coming through in a way that you're like, oh yeah, all those guys, they're good pieces. This reminds me of like a 1998 Mets team. They're like, oh yeah, that team is like a borderline like playoff contender. Like they could actually do some damage if they ever got into the playoffs. It reminds me of those kind of teams where they're just built on good offense, some solid veteran starting pitching, interesting bullpen work, but the Mets would always get through it, and those were just fun teams to watch. So it's been reminding me more and more of a late '90s Mets team, rather than the very unimpressive early 2010s Mets team this team looked like at the beginning of the season. So it's been fun to watch this adjustment by the Mets, and fun to watch them play actual quality baseball for the first time in quite some time. So we're having fun. We're loving what we're watching, and we're hoping that these next few weeks with this team are going to see them take another step forward and maybe even get even better.
Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets Podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go, Mets.